I joined the Stones in May or June of '69, and so I hadn't earned enough money or done enough work on that level to have any kind of tax problems. But one of my most vivid memories is being flown there in our own private jet. I thought, my God, this is, this is the high life. This is wonderful.
That period was probably one of their most productive and creative. We made some great albums.
Mick could play anything. He was so soulful.
Incredible melodic sensitivity about his playing.
What was the meaning of the Rolling Stones at this point?
A rock revolution, and it's happening at the Rolling Stones. Get down!
There's a hidden gem tucked deep into Exile on Main Street, the Stones' legendary 1972 double album, a track that never became a radio hit.
I don't think they've ever sort of said, let's make this kind of album or that kind of. They take on their own character once you start to get into it. Since we sort of left the country and we're recording in a totally different way, I just wanted to reduce it back to basics.
I gave it an A+. Once I got it, I loved it. The reason people overlook that record, I believe, and one reason I gave it a long listen, was its sound. It has this murky sound. There are people who claim, I don't know if I agree with them.
And I bought Exile on the day it came out, and I just thought it was fantastic. And I couldn't understand these lukewarm reviews in the papers that I read at the time, like Melody Maker and New Musical Express.
I think it's astonishing that this album, which I don't regard as being even close to Beggar's Banquet, Let It Bleed, and Sticky Fingers, which I say arguably are the three greatest back-to-back-to-back albums in the history of rock and roll, that this Exile, this album, is the one that has not only survived and continues to sell, but that people, and trust me, I've talked to so many people about this, that for those who are under the age of 30, this is hands down the greatest Rolling Stones album of all time.
But among diehard fans and musicians, it's a cult classic. It's raw, gritty, and soaked in the kind of blues that cuts to the bone. We're talking about Ventilator Blues, and the unsung hero behind its haunting groove, that would be none other than Mick Taylor.
That whole period was incredibly creative for all of us.
Ventilator Blues was one of the few Stones songs written at the infamous Villa Nelcote in the south of France, where the band recorded most of Exile while in tax exile and in total chaos.
It was absolutely chaotic.
It was a collection of people who had no last name. You didn't know what it was they did for a living, most of which was illegal, or most of them did not need to work for a living.
24-hour, house party, if you like. I mean, there were numerous people and hangers-on and dealers and groupies and Graham Parsons' girlfriend, and it just became this sort of big, ongoing, stoned house party.
The house was hot, humid, and filled with characters from the underworld. The basement was dark and sweaty.
Very oppressive atmosphere, very humid at the time, and even when the autumn descended, it was like, a wet raincoat had been spread across there. And it says a lot for Keith that he was actually able to sort of hold it together in that atmosphere.
Instruments warped in the heat, and yet, out of that madness came one of the band's dirtiest grooves. And guess who sparked it? Mick Taylor.
What it was like is a song Ventilator Blues, which I think is about the air conditioning failing during a session.
When your spine is cracking and you...
It was Taylor who came up with the distinctive, snaky guitar riff that anchors Ventilator Blues. It's grimy, it's tense, it feels like it's crawling across a sticky floor in a smoke-filled room.
This was a whole different approach to music and recording from what I'd been used to, you know. Usually you know the name of the song you're playing.
I'm trying to make the songs up. There's a riff, there's a groove, and you're trying to make up the words, you're trying to make up a melody. And so the writing process was very, very loose.
It was about as unrehearsed as a hiccup, you know. It just was, it wasn't exactly spontaneous combustion.
Place to call to Henley.
Give George Harrison my best wishes.
Yes.
Not to mention his old lady.
But Taylor didn't stop at just writing the riff. He locked in with Charlie Watts and Bill Wyman to create one of the Stones' heaviest and most unusual rhythms.
Should be a chord progression.
The one that's great on that is Ventilator Blues.
We started off just jamming. Really casual, you know, untogether.
Charlie's drumming here is more complex than usual, syncopated and off-kilter. Wyman follows close behind.
It always ended up great, you know. That was the great thing about it.
We always rehearse it, and it's a great riff, but we never do it as good as that. You know, if something is not right, either Keith will play a bit different, which is not the same, or I'll get it wrong. And that's because Bobby said, why don't you do this? And I said, I can't play that. He said, yeah, it's this. I stood next to me clapping. I just followed his time.
Where I ever had the balls to try to tell Charlie Watts where 2 and 4 words is beyond me. I've often thought to myself, son, what were you smoking or what were you drinking? And God bless his heart and patience, he listened to me. There you go, you hear it right here. I taught Charlie Watts how to play this.
And Taylor? He's the glue. His guitar slides around the beat, pushing and pulling, giving the whole track this tense, unstable feel, like it might fall apart at any moment. But it never does. It just keeps grinding forward. If the Stones were ever close to sounding like a Delta blues band from the underworld, this was it. The riff wasn't flashy, it was perfectly filthy, built for the song's claustrophobic mood. Keith Richards even admitted later that the riff was totally Mick's, and that's saying something coming from the riff king himself.
Once we got into a studio and picked up our guitars, we were in our own world. Nothing else could really get in the way.
For all his brilliant playing with the Stones, Mick Taylor rarely got official songwriting credit, but on Ventilator Blues, he did. The song is credited to Jagger, Richards, Taylor, a rare honor, and one that reflects just how central he was to the song's creation.
A lot of that has had to do with Mick and Keith not really working together as songwriters. I mean, the song still said Jagger Richards, but they weren't really written like that. I mean, some of the songs, some of the songs I helped write, a few anyway.
It's a bit of a travesty that Ventilator Blues is the only track that Mick Taylor ever gets a co-writing credit on, because you can hear him in that track loud and clear, but you can hear him in a lot of other tracks that he wasn't given credit for.
It's hard to say whether Mick Taylor, you know, was demanding more accreditation than he'd hitherto received. You know, he did get credit on Ventilator Blues, but nothing else, and who knows? Do you know? I mean, you know, Mick himself was sliding into the kind of narcotic chaos that enveloped the Rolling Stones at this point. You know, he was a classic victim of the Stones' sort of demonic seduction, and you know, ultimately could not handle being a part of that group.
And yet, despite its power, Ventilator Blues was never played live by the Stones after the Exile sessions. Keith once joked that they could never get the groove quite right again, which might speak volumes about how irreplaceable Taylor's touch was.
They didn't do 20 songs from Exile. They did like 4, they did All Down the Line, they did Rocks Off. But in concert, then, those were never the best songs. They were like the breaks in the action until they got to Brown Sugar, Jumpin' Jack Flash, You Can't Always Get What You Want, Bitch, you know, and on and on and on. You know, Honky Tonk Women, which they did as well on that tour.
Ventilator Blues might not be the Stones' most famous track, but it's one of their most vicious, and it stands as a testament to Mick Taylor's darker, deeper contribution to the band's golden era.
You know, as is well known, you know, now, that period was probably one of their most productive and creative. We made some great albums.
Mick Taylor contributed so much, from the guitar meshing from Honky Tonk Women, Sticky Fingers, I think he vaguely co-wrote Sway, he's all over Exile, Ventilator Blues, he got a co-credit.
The greatest Rolling Stones lineup was the one between 1969 and 74 with Mick Taylor. That's the period they created their greatest music, their most enduring music for me. They're the records that I go back to.
He wasn't just a brilliant soloist. He was a groove player, a blues man, a tone sculptor. And on Ventilator Blues, he helped craft a song that sounds like sweat dripping down concrete walls.
Mick was very much a solo player, incredible melodic sensitivity about his playing.
Within a few weeks, Jagger was saying, actually, Keith Richards is the sound of the Stones. Mick Taylor wasn't really a Stone at all. But, and in a way, at the time, we undervalued him, I think. But listening back, he contributed so much, and he saw the Stones through that period with his very elegant, virtuoso playing, which I think was crucial at that time when everyone was looking towards, you know, progressive rock and rock being almost on a classical status.
To me, the real interest in playing guitar is to play guitar with another guy. 2 guitars together. If you get it right, it can become like an orchestra. And Mick Taylor's virtuoso.
Mick could play anything. He was so soulful.
Sometimes, revolution doesn't scream. Sometimes, it just groans through the vents.